نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور انفسنا ومن سيئات اعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له واشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له واشهد ان نبينا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى اله وصحبه اجمعين اما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمه الله وبركاته. Welcome back, brothers and sisters, once again to our open halaqah. On Thursdays, we don't have a set topic. Sometimes we revisit the khutbah that was given last week, or we discuss other topics that might be of interest. Today, inshallah, is going to be brief, slightly different. We're going to visit the khutbah, but we'll look into a preview of tomorrow's khutbah, inshallah. And we might come back and then expand on this in the future. But this is just a glimpse, inshallah, into tomorrow's khutbah. One point of interest is that when you go through the Quran, you will come across many different stories, stories of the prophets, what happened to people before us, and so on. One unique aspect of the Quran is that many of these stories are repeated. And the beautiful thing about the repetition is that you'll find every time a story is repeated in a different part of the Quran, there is always something of value that is added. Some new information that we did not know in that particular passage, or we're told about events that were happening at the same time elsewhere, or before, or even after. So my humble advice to brothers and sisters is to always look for these stories that are mentioned more than once in the Quran, because once you add up those different, the same story but being repeated in many different ways, you will always, it adds to the beauty of the Quran and adds to the understanding that we have. So in the past, we've covered the story of Musa alayhi salam from time to time, and this is a story that you will find in almost every chapter in the Quran, at least bigger chapters. Tonight, inshallah, we'll look very briefly at the story of the creation of Adam alayhi salam. And this is again one of those stories that is mentioned many times in the Quran, in the long surahs, and it is referred to in the shorter surahs as well. So you'll find sometimes there's very detailed information about what happened, what Iblis said, what ended up happening to Adam alayhi salam, and so on. And other times you will find a general mention. So just to give a bit of a recap, when it comes to the creation of Adam alayhi salam, human beings, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, and the jinn we created before, meaning before the creation of human beings. And this is very important to understand, is that according to the majority of the scholars, the earth was already populated before the human beings, Adam alayhi salam, was sent down. The command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala literally is meaning descend on earth. So before Adam alayhi salam comes, there are jinn and other creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some we know, some we do not know. But the important thing is that from amongst the jinn, there used to be a very pious leader amongst them. That individual was Iblis. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him by raising his rank and actually making him in the company of angels, and this is how the backstory starts. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates Adam alayhi salam. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the command, وَقُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ. All of the malaika, the angels, they made sujood except Iblis. And the highlight, I think, here by many scholars is the type of kufr, disbelief that Iblis actually came with, because what he ended up doing is kufr. He became a kafir by rebelling against the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And his type of rebellion and disbelief, it is a special category, the scholars they say. Because if you look at Fir'aun, for example, he proclaimed to be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one to be worshipped. Did Iblis do so? He never did. When you look at the evil that Fir'aun committed, as an example, did Iblis commit all those evils? No. What Iblis does is that he gives this waswas, these whispers, and at the end of the day, the human being themselves are responsible for their actions. And we'll find out later on that Iblis actually tries to remove blame from himself. And he will say, فَلَا تَلُومُونِي وَلُومُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Do not blame me, but blame yourselves. So this is something that Iblis will say on Yawm al-Qiyamah, but here we're told about what happened at the time of creation of Adam alayhi salam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells Adam, or tells Iblis and the angels to make a sujood. وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَاكُمْ ثُمَّ صَوَّرْنَاكُمْ ثُمَّ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ. All of the angels made sujood except Iblis. Many people misunderstand this verse and they think that Iblis was from amongst the angels or an angel himself, and that is not the case. In Surah Al-Kahf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it very clear. كان من الجن ففسق عن أمر ربه, that he used to be from the jinn and he rebelled against the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the first thing of Iblis denies or rejects the command of Allah. What is the first thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does? He asks him. He says, قَالَ مَا مَنَعَكَ أَلَّا تَسْجُدَ إِذْ أَمَرْتُكَ. Why did you not prostrate when I gave the command? And that in itself is a great lesson. And the scholars in Islam, they say the lesson here is you see Allah ar-Rahman himself asking Iblis or giving Iblis a chance to speak. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything. He knows the unseen, He knows the possible from the impossible, and He knows the possible, if it were possible, how it would be possible. There's nothing that is hidden from Allah. But the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking Iblis here, it teaches us human beings to not rush to conclusions. And so we've covered this before in other classes, and here you'll see Allah Azza wa Jalla asks him, and Iblis starts speaking. Have you ever heard the expression where they say, you just need to give a fool an opportunity to speak and they will end up disgracing themselves? This is what is happening here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving out of His mercy and wisdom and knowledge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving Iblis a chance to explain himself. But Iblis, being the fool he is, instead of fixing the situation, instead of returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does he do? Well, what does he do? He goes off on a tangent and he starts speaking about things that he has on his mind. He says, أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِنْهُ, I am better than him. خَلَقْتَنِي مِنْ نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتَهُ مِنْ طِينٍ. So Iblis here, he knows who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, and he even knows the blessings of Allah, that Allah created him different from the creation of Adam alayhi salam. And Iblis, when he's speaking like this, his main problem, it is not obeying Allah. Many people, they miss this subtle point. They think that it is just that Iblis disobey the command of Allah. But really, if you dig into it, the issue that Iblis had was not with Allah, so to speak, it was with Adam. Because if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given a command to Iblis to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Iblis would have followed, because he used to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before. But the point here is Iblis objected because now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given the authority to Adam alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in another chapter, إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. So Iblis was against him being subjugated to show respect to someone that he believed was inferior to him. And this is something that you will see often happening. Many people, they will say, you know, I believe in a higher power, I worship God and so on, but I don't ascribe myself to religion. Why? Because, especially from the Islamic perspective, every single prophet that came, what would they always say? They used to say, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُونَ. Have taqwa of Allah and obey me. Right? So for some people it is difficult. They would say the same thing that the people in the past used to say. They used to say, should we follow human beings just like us? Right? They wanted an angel. They wanted someone that they thought was higher than them in rank. So Iblis is the one that sets this in motion by speaking the way that he speaks, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that he becomes rajim. Rajim in Arabic, usually when we translate it into English, it means as someone that is outcast. In the Islamic context, it means someone that is far away from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, Iblis has a chance and opportunity. All he needs to do is to say, oh Allah, forgive me, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive him. But he continues in his arrogance. And this is similar to what we've seen with Fir'aun. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends Musa to Fir'aun, فَقُولَا لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا لَعَلَّهُ يَتَذَكَّرُ أَوْ يَخْشَىٰ. Speak to him in a soft way, perhaps he will remember. But what was the outcome? Instead of remembering, Fir'aun added to his arrogance and he started killing the innocent people even further. So here you have Iblis who is speaking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he says in other parts of the Quran, رَبِّ فَأَنذِرْنِي إِلَىٰ يَوْمِ يُبْعَثُونَ. Oh my Lord, give me respite, give me time until Yawm al-Qiyamah. Give me time, do not take my soul until Yawm al-Qiyamah. And what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? قَالَ فَإِنَّكَ مِنَ الْمُنذَرِينَ. You are from amongst those people who have been given this long time, this long life. The scholars highlight a valuable lesson here. They say, notice how Iblis, even though he has fallen into this sin and gone against Allah and become a kafir, إِسْتَكْبَرَ وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. Does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept the dua of Iblis? Yes, he does. It is mentioned in the Quran. So the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts the dua of someone like Iblis, it gives us as believers even more hope in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If the dua of Iblis was not rejected, then the dua of a believer that is calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surely will not be. And then what from the character of Iblis is that he does not take responsibility, and this is shown by those who follow in the footsteps of Shaitan, that often they will try to blame everyone else but themselves. So when he speaks, he says, "Rabbi fabima aghwaytani," or "Bima aghwaytani," oh my Lord, because you made me go astray. So now he's blaming Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his own inaction. And this you'll see sometimes people, they use the qadar, the divine decree, and they will say, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed that I would steal something or commit haram, you know, it was beyond my capability. If I wanted to stop it, how can I go against the will and command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And interestingly, a man at the time of Umar bin Khattab, he came with the same hujjah, with the same argument, and he was caught stealing. And when Umar bin Khattab was about to punish him, and deal out the justice, the man stopped him and he said, "O Umar bin Khattab, I would never have stolen if it hadn't been in the qadr of Allah. This was written for me that I would steal. So how can you blame me for something that has already been written for me?" And Umar bin Khattab looked at the man and he said, "It was written for you to steal, and it was written for us to hold you accountable for that." Right? So when people try to use the qadr to run away from their responsibilities, the response is that this does not hold. And this is what Iblis is trying to do here. He's trying to redirect blame to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when everyone knows that he is responsible for his own actions. And interestingly here he says, "لَأَقْعُدَنَّ لَهُمْ صِرَاطَكَ الْمُسْتَقِيمَ." I will sit and wait for them on your straight path. And the scholars, they say here, صِرَاطَكَ الْمُسْتَقِيمَ, this shows that the place that you will find Iblis, shayateen in general, working the hardest is on Salat al-Mustaqim, or on those people who try to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you will find shaitan, Iblis, not at the nightclubs, because those people have already listened to his whispers, but you will find the bulk of the work of Iblis, shayateen in general, are amongst the believers. He's trying to cause problems, he's trying to make people forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so on. And then he continues speaking. He says, ثُمَّ لَآتِيَنَّهُمْ مِنْ بَيْنِ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ وَعَنْ أَيْمَانِهِمْ وَعَنْ شَمَائِلِهِمْ. I will come at them, I will attack them from, he mentions different directions. He says, مِنْ بَيْنِ أَيْدِيهِمْ, meaning in front of them, between their hands, right in front of them I will come, وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ, and from their back, وَعَنْ أَيْمَانِهِمْ, and from their right hand side I will attack them, وَعَنْ شَمَائِلِهِمْ, and from their left hand side I will attack them. He mentions many different directions, but one that he does not mention, and he does so on purpose, is he does not mention above, because, as we know, the wahi, the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, comes from that direction. An interesting interpretation that some scholars have said, عَنْ أَيْمَانِهِمْ وَعَنْ شَمَائِلِهِمْ. The reason why these two directions are mentioned is that Iblis here is saying, I will divert them from remembering Allah with عَنْ شَمَائِلِهِمْ, from the left-hand side, meaning with evil deeds. I will lure them to commit haram and so on, and this will be the fitna from the left-hand side. وَعَنْ أَيْمَانِهِمْ, and from their right-hand side, I will come at them with things that seem like good things. So he will try to distract the believer from something that is even more important. And we see this all the time. For example, you will see some people in Ramadan, they will put great emphasis on fasting in the month of Ramadan, right? Which is the obligation that we have as a Muslim. But they will not pray a single salah during the whole day. Meaning that the fasting will not be accepted, because fasting and prayer go hand in hand. If a person does not pray at all, completely, then many of the scholars have said such a person is no longer a Muslim, right? So shaitan, this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in many chapters, the phrase is repeated, فَزَيَّنَ لَهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ أَعْمَالَهُم. Shaitan beautified, made it beautiful, their actions. So they will do things, they will think that they're the best people, that they're bringing Islah and they're bringing good and so on. But in reality, it is the plot of shaitan. So how does a person protect themselves from the plot of shaitan? The Quran is by far the best way, because in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us how to go about protecting ourselves from the shaitan himself. And then the story continues with Adam alayhi salam. Now shaitan is thrown out of the presence of the angels, and he is removed. At the same time, shaitan has this ability of doing waswas. This waswasa it is done in a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best how it is, the reality of it. But when Shaitan later on, in this same passage, we find out Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, فَوَسْوَسَ لَهُمَا الشَّيْطَانُ Shaitan gave whisper to them, لِيُبْدِيَ لَهُمَا مَا وُرِيَ عَنْهُمَا مِنْ سَوْآتِهِمَا, to show, to expose them their private parts. And he came to them, وَقَالَ مَا نَهَاكُمَا رَبُّكُمَا عَنْ هَذِهِ الشَّجَرَةِ إِلَّا أَن تَكُونَا مَلَكَيْنِ أَوْ تَكُونَا مِنَ الْخَالِدِينَ. And he gives them all these false promises. And in the next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَاسَمَهُمَا, and he swore to them by Allah. This is the tactic of Shaitan. The Shaitan here, وَقَاسَمَهُمَا, he's swearing by Allah to both of them. What is it that he's swearing by Allah by? He says, إِنِّي لَكُمَا لَمِنَ النَّاصِحِينَ. Verily, indeed, I am the one that wants good for you. And we've all seen these type of people, where on one hand, the person is claiming that they want khair and they want good, but their actions speak otherwise. So here Shaitan is swearing by Allah in front of them, trying to convince them. فَدَلَّهُمَا بِالْغُرُورِ. The word that is used here, فَدَلَّهُمَا, it evokes or it brings the meaning that Shaitan did not just come to them one time, whispered, and then left. Because Shaitan is persistent. He came to them many times, time and time again, and he would whisper little by little, and he would remove himself. Why would Shaitan be persistent? Because the tactic of Shaitan is not that he will, he knows that if he comes to a person and he tells them, disbelieve in Allah, just by the nature that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created human beings, the fitna, most people will object it. Or if Shaitan comes and says, kill this person, people will say, no, I'm not a killer. But what will Shaitan do? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ. Do not follow the footsteps of Shaitan. So Shaitan is very good at leading a person up to the point where they themselves think that that idea or that thought belongs to them. And it is something that he is persistent with. He knows that it will not happen on the first try, the second try. This is why, as Muslims, it is very important that we are always vigilant in anything that is connected to the Shaitan. So if we have bad thoughts, we should fight those bad thoughts, place our trust in Allah, because the moment you say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, the Shaitan will go away. But will he stay away? No, he will not. He will come back the very next moment and he will whisper something else. So this is a constant battle, it is a constant fight, and that fight continues until the person leaves this hayat dunya, until they leave this life and go to the next life. Until then, Shaitan will have that impact and influence where he will be able to whisper and he will be able to influence. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised, لَأَمْلَأَنَّ جَهَنَّمَ مِنْكُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. I will fill Jahannam literally with all of you, meaning all of the ones that are following the Shaitan, Iblis. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will hold them accountable and punish them on Yawm al-Qiyamah. An important point to highlight here before we conclude is, as Muslims, we do not think of Iblis, Shaitan, in the same way that people in other religions try to portray it. Sometimes, especially in society, people try to make it seem like it is God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on one side, and Shaitan fighting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on one side. This is not the way that we as Muslims understand it. We understand completely and fully that Iblis is nothing but a servant, a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His wisdom, created Iblis the same way that He created all of creation. And we should not think that the Shaitan has more of a power or authority than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him. This is important to understand because again, many times people, they will think that Shaitan is fighting against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He might be thinking that, but in reality, he is part of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and anything that he does, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of all his actions, and on Yawm al-Qiyamah, his time will be up, and even then he will try to blame everyone else except himself. But on that day, he will be thrown into Jahannam, wa'iyadu billah, along with everyone that believed or followed him. Like I said, inshallah, this class today was just an insight into tomorrow's khutbah, and inshallah we'll keep expanding on it in the future. We will stop here for tonight, and inshallah we'll continue next time. If anyone has any questions, now is the time to ask.